Possession crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. It's over the bar. Oh, holy Moses.
Hello and welcome to the Sunday game. My name's Mikey Stafford. Sorry, no, that was my audition. My audition tape for later.
Try run, Mikey. You're not doing your chances any good for hosting the Sunday game with that kind of
I know, it's the bright lights. Hello, welcome to the RTÉ GAA Podcast, Stephen. Mikey Stafford here. Probably not going to be busy every Sunday night next summer. Joined by Whelan Fitzmaurice, Ciaran, Whelan, and as always, Rory O'Neill. How are we doing, lads?
Very good.
Mikey. Not about
Mikey.
Look, Éamonn Pat Spillane did it. You know, he went from being a Kerry pundit to being the presenter of the Sunday game. Have you any interest in following in Des's footsteps there?
No, thanks, Mikey. Thanks for the offer, though. What about yourself? Do you mind firing it over in the Kerry fellas? What about yourself? You've loads of experience of hosting and everything else now.
I don't know. I don't know if they really trust men with beards on RTÉ television anymore, do they? It's not the 70s anymore. I don't think I'd get away with it. Wheelo, you're in there nearly every Sunday night. You sort of swap to the other side of the studio.
well, yeah, no, certainly not, Mikey. But a few months, you know, they've all gone. Everything like that.
You're the senior analyst now.
I'm the longest there, which means I'm probably the next one to go, Rory. Crazy few months, you know, between the managerial usual appointments going on and a lot of guys jumping down that route. You know, Kevin going into Mayo and Colin, you know, I actually predicted the Colin one, you know, spoke to him during the Dublin Kerry game, and he was being very coy, and I knew there was definitely something up, and you got a sense that was a job he always wanted, had gone for it before, and I think the timing was perfect for him to go in, retiring. You know, he's like Éamonn there in his suit. He doesn't have to sit behind the desk anymore in the school and deal with all the day-to-day issues. So has the time. So yeah, it's been an interesting few months, hasn't it? And then Des goes. So I don't know. Where do we go from here?
Maybe Des is taking over Roscommon, lads. Maybe.
Des is going.
Well, I tell you, over the last few months, Éamonn.
Although he has connections in Donegal, doesn't he? That job is still vacant.
Yeah.
True.
Last few months in Dublin, if he went into the Dole office, he nearly came out with an inter-county job.
Sure, but we look. It just begs the question. Like Éamonn there, we know Éamonn's just kind of sitting on his hands, and if he wants to replace Jack, you know, they kind of got a job share thing going on there. You know, they can swap back and forth or whatever. But you, Wheelo, what are you doing? How did you not get yourself a managerial job?
I don't have a handy number like Éamonn does. You know, he's just putting on that suit for show. You know what I mean?
Do you get a call? Do you get a call from Desi Dolan yet? We don't know.
Very smart, Rory. But no, listen. When you strip it back, lads, the time that's involved, you know, and you look at most of the guys that are going into it, you know, either retired or, should I say, teachers? I'd say that. But no, like I think it's actually something that's kind of probably getting out of control, and Éamonn will probably be able to talk about this in a lot more detail. I think the time factor that's involved in managing an inter-county team, no matter who it is very, very significant, and it is a full-time job. And I think Jack O'Connor touched on that last year when he went back into Kerry, and you can certainly see, you know, Kevin obviously is retired from the army and he's willing to invest 4 years of his life to get Mayo where he needs to get them, and it's a massive job at massive time. So and I think it's not going to get any better. I think, you know, and it's going to be a challenging one for the GA going forward. In that regard, you know, you can see Donegal are still on the hunt. Roscommon are still on the hunt for managers. I know Monaghan, you know, obviously Vinnie Cowley's gone in there. They were certainly on the hunt. A lot of different candidates. So it's an interesting dynamic that's not going to get any easier in terms of time for people going into those situations.
No. Rory, you obviously worked with Des for quite a long time before you went over to do the live Sunday game. You were that man on the evening Sunday game. Were you the editor when he came in as presenter?
Yeah, no, I took over I think in 2012, and I did it until I did 8 seasons of it with Des, so I worked really closely with him. in all that time, and we had a great time. Actually, there was a lot of hairy moments, to be honest, and but it was very enjoyable. And I think he put in an unbelievable shift. I think he's an underrated presenter in a lot of ways, because I think what you absolutely have to have in that job is a really good editorial snout. You need to understand what's the story. What is the story here today? What's the thing that people are going to be talking about? And I think, to be fair to Des, he's a GAA man to his very core, and he gets that, and he understood that from the start. And the two of us had a pretty good relationship the whole way through. He trusted me, I trusted him, and we had some good times and some bad times as well. I mean, there were a couple of instances that we had, which I won't go into. Right,
a few hairy nights, Rory. Yeah,
a few very hairy nights. There was one particular incident with one particular county, which will remain nameless, where they were threatening to throw us out of the winner's hotel. Right, So, like, look, these are like, I mean, look, he's put in an unbelievable shift. He did it for 15 years. It's tough going as well. I mean, Whelan does it, and Éamonn, you've done it. It's a 10, 12, 13-hour day, watching about 8, 9, 10 matches across Saturday and Sunday, not finishing until 12 o'clock. Monday's a write-off because you're so mentally fatigued. And I think, look, ultimately that gets to you eventually, and you just need a break from it. And I think over the last year, with the proliferation and increase in the number of games that is now being foisted upon the show to try and cover, I think it just became very, very, I suppose, unenjoyable from that point of view, because there was nothing. I'll give you a quick story. When the round robin in hurling came in 2018, it was the same year that the first year of the trial of the Super 8s also came in. So I knew in advance of that this was going to be a heap of matches, much more games. And I worked it out. I think the championship hurling and football went from something like 60 in total, hurling and football, up to somewhere in the region of about 90 games. Hurling, I think, went from 20 up to 30. Football went from 60 up to 70. It was just a massive influx of extra games that you were going to have to cover. And I went into the head of sport at that time, Ryle Nugent, and I said to him, we need a Saturday night highlights show to take the pressure off. And he said, yeah. And I explained the reasons why, and he agreed. And then he went and looked at the contract, and he said, we can't do it. So, because someone else had the rights. And like, I think that's part of the frustration, I suppose, that has probably manifested itself in the sort of abuse that Des has unfairly gotten over the last few years. And it's been a very, very difficult job, I suppose, from that point of view. I think people don't really understand it until you've been in there. And I think, look, he's done he's gone out at the top 15 years, the flagship show. And I think, look, from his point of view, the time is right. Time for him to go off to pastures new, and all you can do is just wish him well. He's a good mate, and just well done.
Yeah. Interesting times ahead, and I don't think any decision has been made yet. So, lads, look, I'm recording my audition tape later. You lads should get one in as well. Email them straight into Declan McBennett. He'll really appreciate as many audition tapes as he gets, I'm sure. Don't fire me for saying that, Declan. Right, we'll leave Des there. Happily back to radio, where I think he does a wonderful job on Saturdays, and now he'll be on Sunday Sport. As we were going to mention the GA's kind of referee respect kind of thing that's coming up this weekend. I don't know what you call the campaign, information kind of drive, whatever it is. But Éamonn, really, like, it's being overshadowed repeatedly, and at the moment, the kind of whatever they're saying in Croke Park, there seems to be a sense that it's perhaps not quite filtering down. I don't mean to the sidelines where the people are behaving in an unbelievable manner in this autumn for some reason, but I mean in terms of the kind of the units, the county units, etc. But a lot of people might have seen the headlines today. We're recording this on Thursday. The Castlebar Mitchells have submitted a report to the GAA and TUSLA stating there are reasonable grounds for concern related to child abuse following an incident at an under-17 cup fixture, which a lot of people might have heard about. Between Westport and Castlebar. A Castlebar player was allegedly assaulted by an adult who came onto the pitch. That adult was subsequently giving a very, very strong 96-week ban. he appealed, was reduced to 2 games, and Westport were reinstated into the competition. So at this stage, this game between Castlebar and Westport, which I think was a minor football semi-final, is due to be replayed. Castlebar aren't having it. That's why they sent in this report. Don't want to talk about this individual incident, obviously, Éamonn, but interested, as an educator, just to get your point of view. Are these things only just being highlighted this year because for some bizarre coincidence, or is this a really worrying trend we're seeing in terms of referee abuse, and now this new way darker element, because we had an incident in Tipperary as well where we're seeing minors players being altercations between them and adult spectators or mentors. It's disconcerting in a major way.
It is, Mikey. Look, it's an absolute minefield. I think we could have a podcast on the whole thing, to be honest. We could spend hours talking about it, the four of ourselves, never mind a national conversation. I think it's always been there, to be fair. Yeah. But I think, with the prevalence of mobile phones now and everything's being recorded, I think it's picked up and it's circulated a lot quicker. And the incidents have always been shocking, but when in the heat of the moment, sometimes I think in the past when it wouldn't have been recorded, it would have been passed off and it mightn't have been as scrutinized afterwards. But when you see some of the incidents in the cold light of day, it's very hard to defend them. I think in terms of the respect thing, it's obviously hugely important, and we often draw the comparison with rugby. A favourable comparison with the way that the referees are treated in rugby. I remember being involved with Kerry as a selector under Jack my first time, and Alan O'Sullivan would have been involved with us as a trainer as well, and he came from a rugby background. And I remember a game early in the National League, something happened, I can't remember even what happened, but Alan wanted to draw the linesman's attention to something, so he was calling him sir. He was addressing him as sir. So we were kind of looking at him as if, he'd 10 heads, like we were kind of saying, your man's going to think there's something wrong with him. But
or he's being smart. He's being
smart. Exactly. Yeah. And that was just what Alan was used to from his upbringing in a rugby background. And that was the way he dealt with the officials. I think, look, it's an absolute fundamental that the respect has to be there towards the officials, but then respect is always the two-way house. That has to be earned then at the other side as well. And again, there's a huge debate to be had at the top end of the game. I think there is a lot of respect for the referees for the most part, but there are some referees that I think as a player and as a manager, the most infuriating thing you can have at the top end of a game is when a referee won't communicate with you. If you're trying to communicate with them on a reasonable level, that you're not roaring and shouting at someone, but if you're asking a question about something and you're being blanked, I think that's very frustrating, and I don't think that is creating a culture of respect. I think at the lower ends of the game, then when a referee is sent to referee a game on his own or on her own, with no linesman, no umpire, anything with them, that's an absolute minefield, and that's a disaster waiting to happen. And again, the respect thing, I'm not sure how respectful that is towards the players and the managements and to the referee themselves and being put in that particular situation. Then you're going back to the critical mass, the numbers. There aren't enough people to do the jobs with the amount of games that are being played. And we do a thing in school when the kids are in fourth year where they do a referees course as part of their transition year program. They do the coaching course as well, but they do the referees course to see if there's any few of them that would be interested in it, and a couple of them have gone on and have become referees afterwards, which is good. But I think we have to be doing that nationally all over the place, trying to get young people involved in refereeing and just have more numbers. But like I said, it's a huge debate to be had. But at the moment, I don't think we're in a great place at a lot of levels in terms of the respect we're trying to roll out, and it's impacting, which is unfortunate, and it is something that we have to change.
Yeah, Ciaran, what this Mayo case in particular highlights, and what I think myself and Rory have brought up with referees and with former GA presidents on the podcast not too long ago, is the fact that what seems to happen is what most right-thinking people might consider to be the correct punishment is doled out, as in this case a 96-week ban, but then an appeal, more times than not, seems to be successful in the GAA, and that, to me anyway, that's the most frustrating thing. And obviously that's what's got to Castlebar here, and they've taken very strong, they've had a very strong reaction to it by taking it outside the GAA disciplinary system, and I can understand why they've done that. And that's what people who have hair, I'm told, what they pull their hair out over is things like this, is it's the disciplinary kind of system and how tilted it seems to be in favor of the accused or the convicted, almost, if you take a ban as being a conviction in GA terms.
Yeah, and I think that is, again, a culture that is there within the GA, and it's been there for a long time, and that culture to appeal. And I know the GA looked at that a few years ago, and they tried to bring in the DRA to try and bring in their own legal side of it to deal with situations, but it really didn't stop the process, and it is a bit of a cop out in some ways, that sometimes you do have to accept your punishment, and we've all been in scenarios where, I've been in scenarios where we have appealed collectively as a team, and I've been in scenarios where you've accepted your punishment and that sort of stuff on the playing field. So I think that's something that is, like Éamonn says, it's always been there, and it's a huge frustration that culture exists around appeal instead of holding the hand up and accepting the punishment. Like in everything we do in life, everybody knows after an event where they're wrong. Everybody can see the red mist every now and then, but you have to reflect on these things sometimes and realize for the better of the game that you're out of order, and you have to learn from those mistakes. Like, I think there's two. The way I think, if you look at, okay, we've got that issue with respect around referees, which kind of has to start from the bottom up. And I think there's two strands to it. Obviously, there's the referees issue, and certainly I see in local clubs, and looking after a minor team, and I've got to know a good few teenagers and guys that have actually taken up the whistle and went refereeing juvenile games, in recent years, and have opted out of it very quickly. Don't want the 20, 30 quid at a weekend because the abuse that they're getting at under 8 and under 9 matches, and that's just intolerable. That's just, you're talking the Go game system is non-competitive. There's absolutely no reason why there should be any engagement from the sidelines at all with referees that are young, 14, 15, that we're trying to encourage to get into our games. And that is a big problem that needs to be dealt with in terms of the sideline abuse. And it's getting worse. I don't think it's getting better. I actually think it's getting worse. Yeah. And I think on the flip side to that, in terms of encroachment on the field, Mikey, I think that's, there's always been the odd dust up. That's been part of the game for 20, 30 years within the white lines of the field, where there might be a dust up or a bit of a digger match between, 5, 6 lads or even more. But there seems to be an entitlement maybe in recent years, and maybe people might disagree with this, but there seems to be a entitlement that when something happens on the pitch now, anybody can enter the pitch, mentors, subs, the whole lot. And that seems to be the way it goes. And I think that's an area where the GA really have to look at and really clamp down on. That if you enter the field of play, if you cross that white line and you're not one of those 30 players, you get sent off immediately. End of story. No ruthless, no mercy approach to it. And there should be designated people on the sideline with physio or one manager who wear bibs, who can encroach to come in and check on the health and safety or welfare of a player. But anybody else that enters the field of play, referees should be given the power to send off immediately, and they should be suspended. And that we need to drive that culture, because I think, that's what's happening a lot of the times. You're going to get instances within the white lines, but I think that we're just seeing more and more where immediately something happens, there seems to be people think they have a permission to enter the field of play, and they shouldn't have. So I think there's a massive problem culture coming up with young referees and abuse from parents on the sideline. But there's also then that issue, with people encroaching on the field of play, and there are two issues that need to be dealt with, because it's not good for the game.
Yeah, Rory, nobody is looking at these incidents and saying they're in any way, acceptable or whatever. And the issue does seem to be the large part of this issue is that Croke Park are doing their living best to come down strong, living best. Like, they're saying all the right things at the moment. They have this campaign coming up, but then it's very easy within the democratic system of the GAA for the central government to be undermined by one of its bodies, one of its regional bodies, in this, let's say Mayo County Council. I'm not saying they're undermining them, I'm just saying that this case, doesn't send the message that Croke Park has been trying to send for the last few months. And this is a real problem for the the management of the GAA.
You're trying to change a cultural mindset. That's a very, very difficult thing to do. A very, very difficult thing to do, especially if it's embedded. Look, I'll give you an example. There's a motion at Congress last year whereby an English club brought the motion, because obviously they might have a lot more players of different nationalities playing GAA in the UK. They brought a motion about automatic expulsion for any racist abuse on the field. Now, that motion got parked because when it went to some subcommittee, they looked at it and they said, oh, but sure, what if little Johnny didn't really mean it and he's very, very sorry and it was a once-off? That's the cultural leniency that has sort of pervaded the GAA, which manifests itself now in the type of, 96-week ban getting reduced to 2 games and on we go. If you want to change something as embedded as this, you have to have a zero tolerance approach. Somebody hits a child, expelled from the GAA, end of. And if that message goes out, I think you might in some way arrest some of this culture to a certain extent. But as long as you're talking, let's have a respect campaign and let's do a little press conference and let's all shake hands with the ref, I don't think it's worth a whole hill of beans, to be honest.
It can seem, Éamonn, I suppose, that campaigns like this weekend, well-meaning as they are, they can seem kind of like, kind of PR kind of exercises, especially when they're thrown into the light of kind of what's actually happening in the GAA's kind of disciplinary system at regional level or county level. And that's tricky. And as Rory says, there have been attempts have been made to rewrite rule books and to kind of firm these things up. And it seems to be a really tricky one. And people from the outside might look in and say, why isn't this something that there's an appetite to change and change quickly?
Yeah, absolutely, Mikey. And look, I'd be sympathetic for the GAA centrally as well, because they want to do something.
They do.
They want to try and do something to draw attention to it. And in fairness, the incidents are probably drawing attention to it anyway, but there is a bit of noise around it this week, around the respect campaign this coming weekend. But look, Rory mentioned there the zero tolerance thing. Unfortunately, as humans, if you want to change behavior, and particularly deeply embedded behavior, there has to be sanctions. That's the only way it works. Ciaran mentioned earlier about, being sent off. And when you're sent off as a player, if you're suspended, I've been there, done that. It hurts you as a player to miss a game. Then if your team ends up losing and you've been suspended for a game and you feel that you could have contributed, that adds to the kind of hurt and disappointment, and you're kind of saying to yourself, I'm not going to be in this position again. So, when the suspensions and the sanctions carry through, they definitely have an effect. I think we all when we're in school, we're always trying to do everything from the positive point of view, and you're trying to bring everyone with you, and you're always coming at it from the positive angle. But there are times then when sanctions have to be imposed, and that's to help a student or to help someone with a behavior issue to try and change their behavior. So it's a bit heavy metal stuff today, Mike. I thought we were going to be light-hearted.
Éamonn, just on that, like you know yourself, like sometimes it doesn't be the decision of the player, and county boards have a responsibility here as well, and obviously managers. Like a lot of the time, a player gets sent off. The appeal process will be driven by the management. and the county board will back the management, and that's where that kind of parochialism comes in the GA. Do you know what I mean? That
we always had a principle, Ciaran, if someone deserved it, they did the time.
They did the time.
If someone was wrong, then we absolutely backed them to the hilt, and we appealed it, and we did whatever we could do.
Yeah.
But,
that must have been a tricky conundrum, Éamonn, with Paul Galvin, because so sometimes he probably did deserve it, and sometimes he probably
he was never wrong, Rory. He was never in the wrong. He was always wrong. They were always picking on him. But Paul would have taken his punishment at times when he felt he would have deserved it. But then there was times when you would have felt he didn't deserve it, and you would have appealed it. But certainly when I was in charge, we always said that. And the group accepted that if someone did hit someone a clip and they got caught for it, well, you have to take your punishment then, and that was it. I understand the win at all costs mentality as well, but you'd wonder in the long run, does it actually work out?
Yeah, and sorry, just to finish up on it, that's what you're saying there is within the white lines. And even if someone doesn't accept their punishment there, you'll say, well, he wants to play in an All-Ireland final, or he wants to play in a county final, and he'll appeal it. It's not that it's acceptable, but it's understandable. But the idea of adults coming onto a GA pitch to lay their hands on a teenage boy or girl that are playing in a match just because they didn't like something they did, there's no way in the GA in the GA culture that's not explicable in any culture. That's just wrong, and you just feel that the GA have to be able to say no, a 3-year-old can see that that's wrong, so a 2-year ban at the least is fine for you, and there's no room for an appeal. And I know that requires a rewriting of GA constitutions, and will probably take about 4 congresses, but that's kind of what has to happen, really, isn't it? I don't think anybody could disagree with that. Okay, we will move on now, Éamonn. That's quite enough of that for a Thursday morning. I've been dealing with that story, or Thursday afternoon, but I've been dealing with that story since 8 o'clock this morning. I've had enough of it as well, to be honest with you. We'll move on. We do sometimes get accused of being Dublin-centric in RTE, which is terribly unfair. There's only one Dub here. One of us lives in Wicklow. One of them does live in Dublin, but we can't help ourselves. And Éamonn obviously is a great.
We've been very generous, Mikey, didn't we? A couple of our players up here took a break, so.
I always love visiting.
I think that bit's forgotten,
That was nice of his. Anyway,
convince a couple of more of him to take a holiday next year.
I hear Timbuktu is lovely this time of year. Jack McCaffrey's probably been to Timbuktu actually. By the time he's done. Anyway, this is more the club scene I thought I'd talk about. And obviously the finals this year between Kilmacud and the Fianna, both finals, football and hurling, and it just got me thinking. Not necessarily totally a Dublin problem, but it is something, and it's quite glaring when you read down through the Roll of Honour for the last few years in Dublin football. Kilmacud Crokes won this year, Kilmacud Crokes won last year, then Ballymun, then Ballyboden, then Kilmacud, then St Vincent's, then St Vincent's, then Ballyboden, then St Vincent's, then St Vincent's, then Ballymun, then St Bridget's in 2011, then Kilmacud, then Ballyboden, then Kilmacud, then St Vincent's, and 2006 UCD won for a change, and then Kilmacud, and then Kilmacud, and then St Bridget's.
Mikey, the interesting thing about UCD winning it, they won that champ. I was at that match actually. They won that championship that year, and they got thrown out after that.
That's right,
because the Dublin clubs got upset because basically it was like playing an inter-county team. But anyway, sorry.
Yeah. Obviously, my small club Raheny, we got to one county semi-final, lads, in 2002. And who bet us? UCD, and it's stuck in my lads were able to play in their local championship, and they're able to play in the Dublin championship, and it was just absolute nonsense. It was so annoying at the time that your own club where you're from, your own community, you get so far, you get on a run, and a fucking college team beats you. You know what I mean?
But I think Niall McNamee, if I'm not mistaken, Niall McNamee won 2 county medals in 2 days. He had won the Offaly County Championship on the Sunday, and the Dublin County Final was played on a Monday. It was against Vincent's. They hadn't won it for 20-odd years, and there was a big hullabaloo, and they come in against UCD. I went into it. It was inside in Parnell Park, and they got beaten by UCD again. They were sick. And I think they changed the rules straight after that. Yeah. I think that was the end of UCD then, Wheelo, after that.
Yeah.
Then the hurling.
Not long before time.
UCC are still in the Cork Championship, Ciaran. We won a county championship with UCC.
I know all about it. I was there for that as well.
It was actually very enjoyable. It was like a club team.
I'd say you had that medal hanging in your office, do you?
It was like a club team made up of inter-county players from 4 or 5 counties. Then the hurling in Dublin, just say
I think Paul played on that team as well, didn't he? Éamonn, Paul Galvin, and was Aidan McGarrett on that team?
No, there was 12 Kerry fellas. UCK we were christened at the time.
I saw that sign was over in the uncovered stand. I saw it. We were sick.
Yeah.
See, he didn't think there was going to be any Cork chat today. As soon as there's an in, he won't let me talk.
I didn't bring it up.
Yeah. Anyway, just to say, in hurling in Dublin, Kilmacud are playing the Fianna this weekend.
Again.
And yeah, they played them last year. And the roll of honour then for the last few years in hurling is Kilmacud, Coola, Ballyboden, Coola, Kilmacud, Ballyboden, Crave Ciaran in 2006. Fair play to them. Then those devils from the N11 UCD got back in with a couple there before Crave Ciaran and back to O'Toole's. My point is, it's pretty obvious in Dublin that there's a bit of a domination by a number of, as we call them, super clubs. Ciaran, I don't know if this has ever been raised or the idea of it, because all good ideas originate in Cork and Kerry. Has there ever been the idea of divisional teams in Dublin to balance things up? You know, could Raheny and Clontarf team up to take on St. Vincent's, etc., to perhaps bring it?
Well, it's interesting. I remember when Pat Gilroy came in 2009. I actually think Colin O'Rourke is doing something very similar. He's disbanded his panel. When Gilroy came in 2009, we had a regional. It was part of the trial process, you know, and we had a regional competition over a weekend, and we actually won at Dublin North East. And it was a kind of competition that started on a Saturday morning as kind of tame, and by Sunday evening, fellas were knocking shit out. But it was actually really enjoyable. But
I'd say so.
I don't see that happening, Mike. I think that's a long way off in Dublin, if I'm being honest with you. And listen, I know it is a big frustration for smaller clubs in Dublin, because I think probably a lot of the bigger clubs, well, obviously the likes of Kilmacud have a massive catchment area on the south side. They have a massive catchment area, and it's purely a numbers game. And you know, if you compare that to the north side, where you've got, you know, Scully, Connell, you've got O'Toole's, you've got Clontarf, you've got Raheny, you've got Crave Ciaran, you've Vincent, Fianna, Whitehall, Erin's Isle, Ballymun, all within a radius of 5 miles. So there's a significant amount of clubs on the north side, and probably, you know, the criticism the smaller clubs would have is that some of the larger clubs are beginning maybe to encroach into their patch, and it's, you know, depending on where lads are going to schools, the bigger clubs will hold that pull on the players, because there's that better chance of success. So there's no doubt about that. Would probably be one of the criticisms that probably aimed in the Fianna, that they may have, you know, encroached in other teams' patches in around the north side, and other clubs maybe were in decline maybe as a result of it. So it is a worrying trend, and definitely the gap is becoming bigger between some of the top clubs and the weaker clubs. Like, there's a huge contrast, I've always felt, in Dublin between the standard of Division 1 and Division 2 in terms of football, and I can't really comment on hurling per se, but yeah, it is a concern. But can I see regional teams in the short term? No, I can't. If anything, I think we'll see some clubs really struggle to field teams, and I think that's happening in some areas in Dublin already, where some old traditional clubs are really struggling to get players on the field of play, and you'd be more worried that they will become nearly extinct and won't have teams.
So you could see amalgamations and kind of mergers, as opposed.
Yeah. Well, it's already happening, Mikey. Like Ballybockle, Garristown, and the Knoll compete at underage level under the banner of St. Peter's, for instance. Like, you know.
Yeah. So,
I've been up there many a time.
I think we'll see mergers rather than a regional approach, because it may just the dynamic. Maybe Dublin being a lot more urban is just the dynamic is slightly different.
Yeah, because there's no parish rule, obviously, Rory, which is kind of what puts manners on things in most of the rest of the country, and obviously it's not impacting on inter-county success, at least in Gaelic football. So there's not like an existential threat to GA here, but there is like, if like I was a member of a very, very lowly team in Dublin, like a Portobello Division 8 team, never had any aspirations to anything but keep a junior football team going. But like if you're a Division 3, like the club you two lads are involved in, it must be very frustrating to see that there's a ceiling there that you're probably not going to crack, Rory, that there's 3 or 4 clubs who have a catchment area and a population and a playing population that's just beyond what you or most other clubs can hope to have.
Well, funnily enough, we may have that problem ourselves over the next 8 to 10 years, given what's going to happen.
Demographics does obviously shift things.
Given what's going to happen in our locality. But no, the point is well made. I think like the concept of divisional teams, which Éamonn would be familiar with, and I'm very familiar with myself in Cork from a Cork perspective. The concept of them is good in that, like, they were designed to stop the small junior club losing a player to a big urban city club, like Christy Ring leaving Clyde to the Glen, go to Glen Rovers. That's how far back it goes, and divisional teams kind of came in. Not primarily because of that, but that's where they took a foothold to try and stop that type of thing. Like Liam Rush leaving St. Pat's of Palmerstown to go to Fianna, Éamonn Fennell leaving O'Toole's to go to Vincent's. These types of things happen because lads don't feel they get the opportunity to play at the highest level with the clubs that they have, and they have further inter-county ambitions and they can't achieve those because of the standard that their club is providing for them. So the divisional concept was brought in to try and offset that, and I think there is good merit in it. Would it work in a Dublin sense? Probably not. I think they're probably too the local rivalries, particularly in North County Dublin, are so enmeshed. I don't know if it would work, and then even in a logistical sense. I think the bigger problem for the Dublin County Board is the sheer size of some of the clubs, particularly on the south side. Fianna are an outlier, but trust me, there's another super club coming. They're called Nave Marnog. They are going, like, I mean, we were out there last week playing an under 8 in an under 9s or under 10s, whatever it was. I mean,
where are they based, Rory?
Port Marnock.
Okay.
Thousands of kids. Like, I mean, they are going to be huge in a couple of years' time.
Lucan people say the same about, don't they?
There is a flip side though to that as well in terms of these bigger clubs, you know. And
are they clubs? Like, are they actually a club?
Oh well, no, but I think in terms of some players that are like they're producing. Like, they're not just winning at senior level, they're winning at minor and all the way up.
Yeah.
And every year they're producing 5-6 players, and the quality of players in that club that can't get into their first team or can't play at the standard that they're probably good enough to play at, you know, I would think there's probably, you lose some players, and I think it becomes frustrating for somebody that's probably played all the way up. It's very difficult for them to break in. Like, breaking into that Kilmacud team, it's inter-county standard. Like, it's inter-county standard. So I think it's very, very challenging for some players within those clubs as well, that they're coming up and they could have 8 or 9 adult teams and they're slotting in at a certain level, which is probably below their capability. They could probably play for any other senior team,
Division 1.
So there's a downside to these super clubs as well from an individual.
And I think the issue for the county board, like, I would have the strong view, it's only privately held view, but I'd be fairly certain that the top figures within Dublin County Board do not want or envisage or would like to have the situation where one club has 4,000 or 5,000 members. The problem for them is, like, ideally there should be 4 clubs in a place like Stillorgan. There should be 2 hurling and 2 football. But where do they go? Where do they train? It's all about land, facilities, pitches, pitch space. And if you dilute that by splitting up Kilmacud, for instance, just take them as an example, sure, you know, like, you're multiplying an already difficult problem by 4, and it's a really hard one for them to solve.
Éamonn, as a Fanug and Field Rangers and Lixnaw man, you must look at these Dublin problems and think they're very different from the problems of, you know, rural clubs on the Western Seaboard, who too many people is not the problem.
Yeah, we're certainly not turning people away anyway, Mikey. Look, I mean, the advantage of the divisional thing is that in Kerry, that players playing with junior clubs in Division 4 or 5 of the county league, they get to play in the county championship, they get to play at the highest level within the county, and they get to put themselves in the shop window for the county team. So that you do end up with, you know, a good few I suppose, comparatively speaking, a good few junior and junior premier players involved in the Kerry squad, which is a great thing. And I suppose, look, just starting it somewhere would be probably a challenge. I mean, we were used always growing up along, playing Whitfield Rangers, I'd say probably from under 16 level up, that we had our own club Finuig, but then we came together for the county championship with Field Rangers. And initially it was a very strange thing, playing with this group, and you didn't really know anyone, and there were the rivals from other clubs. But by the time you got to under 21 level in particular, we lost a couple of minor finals. I'd say we definitely lost one minor final, but we won a couple of under 21s then, and we had a good united bunch then with a bit of spirit. But it can be challenging as well to get a divisional side right. But definitely this year in Kerry with the group games, it's given the divisional sides the 3 games together, and it's given them a chance to develop and kind of get stronger. So it's, if anything, it's harder for the clubs nearly in Kerry at the moment to win a county championship.
And that was a big issue in Cork as well. There was a lot of disquiet about the power of the divisional teams, particularly in Killy in a hurling sense, because it's such a stronghold. So they changed the format in Cork. So what they've done now is the clubs are in 4 groups of 3, and the divisional teams all play off in a separate competition to only produce one team who makes it to the knockout stages. So you remove the possibility of there ever being 2 divisional teams in the final straight away, which I thought was an innovative way of going about it from Cork County Board's point of view.
You do need a PhD in pure maths to understand the Cork championship structures.
Back to Cork again.
Well, we're talking divisional teams.
so Ciaran, just to finish up and to go back to Dublin where we started, this is like with lots of things with Dublin, like it's a slightly intractable problem. Like it's a lot of people, and there's people moving to Dublin every day, and there's a lot more serious infrastructural problems going on than GAA clubs. But like, could you foresee a day when like the county board have to put a stop on underage members joining Kilmacud and say, no, you have to join, that club down in Cornell's Court whose name's escapes my mind.
Nave Olafs.
Yeah, and they have to say that we have to try and balance this up in some kind of natural way, like the Chinese policy of one child per family, etc. Is that what's going to be needed?
I was about to mention the busing in the States, Mikey, and that didn't work out too well either. So
neither are great suggestions, really.
Yeah, no, I think we leave the Dubs to try and figure that one out, but it is a challenging one. I get it, and like the point that Ciaran said, that where you've a lot of talented players coming through, and they're probably not breaking through because the ceiling or the standard is so high within their clubs, just again because of the critical mass, and you're probably losing a lot of very good quality players because of that. So it's a conundrum, but very, like I said, very different to the challenges we're facing down here. And
another area where they lose players as well in that sense, Éamonn, is what can happen too, and this happens quite a lot with the Coolas, Ballybodens, Kilmacuds, and all of those. So players will graduate out of the minor ranks or under 21 ranks and graduate up to senior, and they might make it into the senior, the top team, but they may be supplanted by the next batch of under 21s that come through. But the county board won't regrade the initial few players to drop down a level, because there's a sense that, oh no, they're senior players now, and it can actually be quite difficult to get lads regraded down the ranks to be able to play a championship. And sometimes it can lead to disaffection and in some cases people walking away as well. So it's a really, really tough one. It's a really tough one for Dublin County Board to figure out. Really hard.
I think the first thing that has to happen certainly within Dublin is the change back to under 18.
Because, that's huge.
That has been farcical, and while again it's different in rural areas, that obviously clubs need their minor players, and I understand the concept behind it. It just has not worked in Dublin whatsoever. It's been absolutely farcical introducing under 19, and again it means you've kids literally 16, 17-year-olds leaving juvenile football and being put into that big bad adult football world, and it's in an urban club. That's a very different scenario. They're still kids essentially, and I think taking away that under 18 standard. There was nothing wrong with it. There was absolutely nothing wrong with it in Dublin, and I think they're going to go back there, which will certainly help in terms of the links with adult football. But I know I understand the dynamic can be very, very different in a rural club.
And maybe they need different solutions, Ciaran. Maybe they need the solution for Kerry won't be the solution for Dublin.
Yeah.
That's it. Very good point. Yeah.
I think that's what will ultimately happen, Éamonn. Do you know what I mean? I think that's what ultimately will happen. I think Croke Park have given that choice back to counties to adapt based on their own circumstances and how it's running. But I think that will be a change back to under 18 football next year, which will certainly help in Dublin, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a move being hoped for in a lot of counties around the country. All right, lads.
And I think it's a good point as well. Sorry, Mikey, that the autonomy for county boards to figure out what works best for their particular circumstances and situation, I think is a really key aspect, because it isn't a one size fits all, you know.
Yeah. It probably should be one size fits all when it comes to disciplinary issues, but not when it comes to fixturing. Just to complete that loop.
Hitting a fella box is usually a universal language.
Okay, thanks very much to the lads. We'll be back next week with a hurling podcast. You know, there's no issues there. Obviously, it's God's sport. There's no issues. If you want to tune in on Saturday evening, you can't break them. We have Leinster club football action on the television on Saturday night on RTÉ2 and the RTÉ Player Palatine versus St. Pat's of Wicklow. So you can tune in for that. And obviously Saturday and Sunday sport. We'll be keeping across the county finals and other provincial matters going on. So just to say thank you to Éamonn and to Ciaran and to Rory, and we will catch you again next week. Good luck.
Crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. It's over the bar.